Have you ever looked at a map and wondered what life is like on the other side? Maybe you have a dream of studying in a famous university, or perhaps you want to work in a tall building in a city thousands of miles away. Think about it for a moment. To do those things, you need to speak the language of that place. But how do you prove you can speak it? How do you show a school or a boss that you are ready? For a long time, this was a very big problem. People were moving more than ever before. Students in Asia wanted to go to Europe. Doctors in Africa wanted to work in Australia. But there was no bridge. There was no single way to measure English that everyone agreed on. It was like trying to measure a table with 5 different rulers. It was confusing, and many times it was not fair. My friends, IELTS was born from this need. It was not just created to be a difficult hurdle. It was created to be a bridge for your dreams. Have you ever felt that a language barrier was like a wall? Well, the creators of IELTS wanted to turn that wall into a door. They wanted to create a system that was the same for everyone, no matter where they came from. So, imagine the world 40 or 50 years ago. People were waiting, hoping for a way to connect. They were looking for a global standard. Tonight, we are going to look back at how that standard was built. We will see how a simple idea changed the lives of millions. Are you ready to go back in time with me? Let us see what the world looked like before the test we know today. Before we had the modern IELTS, the world of English testing was like a wild forest. Imagine it. It is the 1960s and 1970s. If you wanted to study abroad, every university had its own rules. Some schools would ask you to write a long essay. Other schools would just have a short conversation with you. There was no standard. This meant that a student might be good enough for one school, but not good enough for another. Can you imagine how frustrating that was? You could spend months preparing, but you did not know what to study. You were walking in the dark. In the United Kingdom, there was a test called the EPTB. That stands for the English Proficiency Test Battery. It sounds very technical, does it not? It was a very old-fashioned way of testing. The EPTB was mostly about grammar and vocabulary in books. It did not really care if you could actually talk to a person. It did not care if you could understand a real lecture in a classroom. It was a test of what you knew about English, not how you used English. But the world was changing fast. People did not just want to read English. They needed to live in it. By the late 1970s, more and more international students were arriving in the UK and Australia. Teachers started to notice something. Many students had high test scores, but they could not understand their professors. The old tests were failing the students and the schools. We needed something better. We needed a test that looked at English as a living, breathing thing. The demand for global mobility was growing like a flame. People wanted to move for a better life, but they needed a fair way to show their skills. The leaders in education knew they had to change. They needed to stop testing grammar rules and start testing communication. This was the beginning of a very big shift in how we think about language. So, where did the spark come from? It started with a partnership. Think of it like 3 friends coming together to solve a giant puzzle. These 3 friends were the British Council, Cambridge English Language Assessment, and IDP Education Australia. They each brought something special to the table. Cambridge had the history of science and testing. The British Council had the reach to all corners of the world. And IDP Australia brought the perspective of a new, growing destination for students. In 1980, they launched a test called ELTS. Notice there is no I yet. It was just the English Language Testing Service. But my friends, the world was becoming international. The creators realized that this test could not just belong to one country. It had to belong to the whole world. So, they worked harder. They spent years researching. They asked, what does a student really need to survive in a new country? In 1989, they added that very important I. The International English Language Testing System, IELTS, was officially born. It was a beautiful vision of cooperation. Imagine the meetings in those rooms. Experts from different continents sat together. They did not want a British test or an Australian test. They wanted a human test. They decided that the test should include many different accents. It should not matter if you learned English in London, New York, or Sydney. If you could communicate, you should pass. This was a very brave idea at the time. Most people thought testing should be very rigid and strict. But the IELTS team wanted it to be realistic. They wanted to create a global standard. And they succeeded. From that small spark in 1989, a giant light began to grow. You see, when people work together for a common goal, they can build something that lasts. IELTS was not just a business. It was a promise. It was a promise that if you worked hard, the world would recognize your effort. Now, let us look at how they built the House of IELTS. They did not just throw things together. They used 4 very strong pillars. You know these pillars well: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. But why these 4? Why not just one big test? Think about your day. When you wake up, you listen to the news. You read your emails. You write a message to a friend. And you speak to your family. The designers of IELTS wanted the test to feel like real life. They wanted to make sure that if you got a high score, you could actually live in English. They also realized that not everyone has the same goals. Some people want to go to a university to study medicine or law. Other people want to move to a new country to work or start a business. This is why they created 2 paths. We call them the academic module and the general training module. The academic path is like a training ground for your brain. It tests if you can handle difficult books and write long reports. It is tough, but it prepares you for the challenge of a degree. The general training path is about everyday life. It is about reading a train schedule or writing a letter to a landlord. It is about surviving and thriving in a new society. But here is the most important part of the design: the speaking test. In many other tests, you talk to a computer. It feels cold and strange, does it not? IELTS decided that you should always talk to a real person. Why? Because language is about people. They wanted to see if you could make eye contact, react to a question, and have a real conversation. This human touch is what made the foundation of IELTS so strong. It was designed to be fair, but also to be deep. It was not about tricking you. It was about seeing the real you. Every part of the test was carefully timed and checked. They wanted to make sure that a 6.5 in Tokyo was the same as a 6.5 in Rio de Janeiro. This was the standard they worked so hard to build. Once the test was ready, it was time to show it to the world. At first, only a few places used it. But slowly, like a sunrise, the word began to spread. In the 1990s, universities in the United Kingdom and Australia began to say, "We trust this test." They saw that students who did well in IELTS also did well in their classes. Then, something very big happened. Other countries started to notice. The United States, Canada, and New Zealand began to open their doors to IELTS. Imagine the excitement. Suddenly, one test could take you almost anywhere. You did not need 10 different tests for 10 different countries. By the early 2000s, IELTS was growing faster than anyone expected. It was not just for students anymore. Governments began to use it for immigration. They realized that if someone wanted to move to their country and work, IELTS was the best way to see if they would succeed. Employers also started to ask for IELTS scores. Big companies wanted to know if their workers could talk to international clients. A high IELTS score became a badge of honor. It was a sign that you were a global citizen. I want you to think about the map of the world again. Now, imagine tiny dots appearing in every country. Each dot is an IELTS test center. From the snowy mountains of Canada to the busy streets of Mumbai, IELTS was there. It became a truly global language. By 2010, millions of people were taking the test every year. It had become the most popular English test in the world for higher education and migration. It spread its wings and flew across every ocean. It did not matter what your first language was, whether you spoke Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, or Vietnamese, IELTS became your second language's home. It was no longer just a British or Australian project. It belonged to the student in a small village who studied by candlelight. It belonged to the professional in a big city looking for a promotion. The wings of IELTS were wide enough to carry all those dreams. But my friends, the world does not stand still. As the years went by, technology began to change everything. We went from writing letters to sending instant messages. IELTS knew it had to change too. It could not stay in the past, but it had to be careful. How do you change a global standard without losing its quality? For a long time, IELTS was only on paper. You had to use a pencil and an eraser. You had to wait for your results to arrive in the mail. But then, the computer-delivered IELTS was born. This was a big step. It meant you could type your essays and get your results much faster. For some people, this was a dream come true. They felt more comfortable with a keyboard than a pen. But IELTS did something very wise. They did not force everyone to use computers. They kept the paper test too. They knew that in some parts of the world, paper was still the best way. They wanted to make sure everyone had a choice. They also kept the speaking test face to face. Even with all the new computers, they knew that talking to a human was the most important thing. They also updated the topics in the test. They stopped asking about old things and started asking about the environment, technology, and modern society. The creators of the test are always listening. They have teams of researchers who look at every single question. They ask, is this fair? Is this clear? Does this really test English? They even introduced IELTS Online for some people so they could take the test from home. They are always finding new ways to make the test accessible. This is the evolution of IELTS. It is like a tree that grows new leaves every year, but keeps its roots deep in the ground. It adapts to the new world, but it never forgets its goal: to be a fair and reliable measure of your skills. It is a journey of continuous improvement. Think about how much you have changed in the last 10 years. IELTS has changed too, always trying to be a better partner for your journey. I want to tell you a secret. IELTS is not actually about the numbers 1 to 9. It is about what happens after you get your score. Think about a young man named Carlos. He lives in a small town. He gets a 7.5 on his IELTS. Because of that number, he gets a scholarship to study engineering in London. Think about a nurse named Amina. She gets a 7.0. Because of that, she moves to Australia and helps save lives in a hospital. For Carlos and Amina, IELTS was not just a test. It was a life changer. It was the moment their world became much, much bigger. When we talk about the impact of IELTS, we are talking about millions of stories just like these. Every time someone opens an IELTS result envelope, their heart beats a little faster. That piece of paper represents months of hard work. It represents late nights of studying and early mornings of practice. It represents the hope of a family. IELTS has allowed people to move across borders and share their cultures. It has allowed doctors to share medical secrets and scientists to solve global problems together. When you sit in a classroom at an international university, look around you. You will see people from every continent. Most of them are there because they passed the same test as you. It connects us. It gives us a common ground. It tells the world, I am ready to participate. I am ready to contribute. It is a powerful thing, isn't it? A simple assessment can unlock a door that was locked for generations. It can break the cycle of poverty and open a world of opportunity. So, when you think about your IELTS journey, do not just think about the writing task 2 or the true-false not given questions. Think about the you that exists on the other side of the test. Think about the places you will go and the people you will meet. That is the real impact of IELTS. Now, no story is perfect. Being a global leader is not easy. Over the years, IELTS has faced many challenges and criticisms. Some people say the test is too difficult. Others worry that it is too expensive. Some people worry about security. How do we know that no one is cheating? The organizations behind IELTS take these challenges very seriously. They do not just ignore them. They listen. They spend millions of dollars every year on security. They use high-tech systems like finger scans and special photos to make sure the test is fair for everyone. If someone cheats, it is not fair to the millions of students who study hard. So, they protect the validity of the test with everything they have. They also work hard to make the test reliable. This means that if you take the test on Tuesday and then take it again on Thursday, your score should be almost the same. This is very hard to do. But they have thousands of experts who check the statistics of every question. If a question is too confusing, they throw it away. They also try to help students prepare. They provide free practice materials and videos. They want you to succeed. They do not want the test to be a trap. They have responded to the world by making the test more flexible. They have added more test dates and more locations. They are always asking, how can we make this better for the test taker? They know that they have a big responsibility. Because their test affects so many lives, they must be as close to perfect as possible. The path forward is about balance. It is about using new technology like artificial intelligence, but keeping the human heart of the test alive. It is a journey of honesty. They admit when things are hard, and they work to fix them. That is how you stay a leader for over 30 years. As we sit here by our campfire, the sun is starting to set on our story. But for IELTS, the sun is always rising. What does the future look like? Imagine a world where language testing is even more personal. A world where the test can adapt to your specific needs, even better than it does today. We are seeing more use of AI to help grade tests fairly and quickly. We are seeing more ways to take the test from different parts of the globe. But even as the technology changes, the core of IELTS will stay the same. It will always be about that bridge. It will always be about the student who wants to learn. It will always be about the professional who wants to grow, and the family that wants a new beginning. The world will always need a way to understand each other. As long as English is the language of the world, IELTS will be there to help us speak it. Think about the legacy of this test. It has connected millions of people and hundreds of cultures. It has made the world feel a little bit smaller and a little bit friendlier. So, my friends, when you start your own IELTS journey, remember this history. You are not just taking a test. You are joining a long line of dreamers and achievers. You are walking a path that millions have walked before you, and just like them, you have the power to cross that bridge. The air is cool now, and our story is coming to an end, but your story is just beginning. Take a deep breath. Be proud of your goals. The world is waiting to hear what you have to say, and IELTS is here to help you say it. Thank you for listening to this story of dreams, science, and connection. I wish you the very best on your journey.